I'm a novice myself, but probably just a few weeks ahead of you, so maybe I can help with basics like those you've raised in your recent post. First, you'll see that I position my bluff titler windows conveniently at a size that happens to suit me. Yours may well be different. I'll take this from a completely cold start, so the first step is to open a new file. That displays this default text layer. So I next change that to my own text, and then change its size using the font property single slider and its position using the text position's horizontal and vertical position sliders, the top two. I find centering it horizontally is easiest by just typing 0 into the number box. Next I add a second text layer, change its text as before, give it a new colour and change its position. Now I select my first line again and make sure that the time slider is at its extreme left position, time 0. Then I again use the text position property to move this first line of text to a place where it won't be visible, say somewhere off the left edge of the screen. Again, that's by trial and error with the horizontal slider. So here you see the bluff titler window after doing this. Note how there's a single keyframe, the small vertical bar, representing this position. If I played it now, we'd obviously never see it at all. So the next step is to make another keyframe where it will be visible. Here I've moved the time slider to 0.5 of a second and set the second keyframe. To centralize precisely, I typed 0 into the box. Now I've turned my attention to the second line. Note that the colour property is still selected, as that was the last one used, so I must first be careful to change the text position. I've made quite a few mistakes by forgetting points like this in my impatience to see the result. Now I go to the left-hand end of the time slider, time 0, and drag the vertical slider to the left. Here I've stopped just before the position that I want to get to, which is right off the bottom of the screen. Now we need to decide the time at which we want this second line to appear. I do it by referring back to text number 1, where keyframe 2 was set to half a second. So we'll set text 2's keyframe 2 to be, say, at 0.6 of a second, just a little bit after that. It's important to get the sequence right. Note that you set the time and then you set the value of the property that you want at that time. This is how it looks just before we create the second keyframe. I did that by clicking the keyframe button here. So now we just proceed in a similar fashion and create keyframe number 3, a little further over. Note that the keyframe is created automatically as soon as you enter a property value. So now let's play the animation and see that it's doing what we want. It's pretty short, so I repeated it a couple of times. Now let's turn to the question of how to flash that second line of text a few times. Let's assume we wanted to start flashing at the 2-second point. That's just 1 second before the end of the 3-second default. There are several ways to do this, but I decided I'd try using the transparency property. I hope one of the experts can suggest a smarter method, because this actually proved a bit tedious the way I did it. It would be very easy in my video editor, so this is really just an exercise based on curiosity. But anyway, this is what I did. The diagram you've been looking at while I've been rambling on just illustrates the basic principle. The key point, no pun intended, is that bluff titler changes the property values between keyframes. So to get the effect of flashing rather than fading, you have to place pairs of keyframes very close together. The diagram illustrates this for the case where you want to flash, say, 5 times a second. That is on for 0.2 of a second, off for 0.2, and so on. So I first placed a keyframe at exactly 2 seconds, with transparency set to 0, so that the text was fully displayed. Then I placed another keyframe just 1 millisecond further on, at time 2.001 seconds. You can do that either by entering the value directly or pressing the right arrow key while the time slider is active. Note how it looks as if there is only one keyframe because they're too close to distinguish. Go through the remaining steps in detail because they're identical. Here, for instance, is the position when I've placed the keyframe at 2.8 seconds. That's getting near the end of the 3-second default animation period, so I then increased it by adding 1 second to the end, using the dialog obtained by pressing Ctrl+L. And here's the position at the very end, when we've reached the 4-second point. And finally we just need to play it to see that it all looks okay.